Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and today we're going to be talking about Chaos Space Marines. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day. If you have any suggestions, please comment down below. And if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. It is because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Chaos Space Marines. Long ago, humanity's guardians, the Space Marines, were brothers in arms. They were all recruited from the greatest warrior peoples. All were genetically enhanced to superhuman levels, and were trained in the highest degree in the art of war and equipped with the finest weapons. They were united in their loyalty to the Emperor of Mankind, and had marched beside him on his great crusade to bring long isolated human worlds into the protection of the Imperium. It was a golden age of great deeds and unsurpassed heroism. Then came the apocalyptic civil war, remembered as the Horus Heresy. The Imperium was sundered. Every world and every institution felt the pain. At the center of it all was an act of betrayal that remains unforgivable 10,000 years later. Fully half of the Space Marines renounced their allegiance to the Emperor. This was no mere rebellion. The traitor Marines had fallen under the diabolical influence of the gods of chaos, infernal warp entities who gnawed at the edge of reality, hungry for the ripe souls of humanity's billions. The Chaos Gods promise immortality and the power to indulge in the traitor Marines' deepest, darkest desires. They would be beyond punishment, with a universe theirs for the taking. Chaos beckoned, and the legions of the lost and the damned followed. Eventually they were defeated by an act of supreme sacrifice on the part of the Emperor and the unflinching loyalty of the Space Marines they once called brothers. In defeat, were driven beyond the realm of man, into the gaping wound in reality known as the Eye of Terror. Now and forever, they have become Chaos Space Marines, despised and feared as traitors and heretics throughout the galaxy. Acting as slaves of darkness, they take strength from their bottomless well of hatred and bitterness. The Chaos Space Marines harness the patronage of the Chaos Gods and rage ceaselessly against the Imperium and its Emperor. They will wage war without an end, until the Emperor is cast down and the Chaos Gods rule over all. Each legion that betrayed the Emperor followed a path into damnation that either led them to one of the four major Chaos Gods, or simply venerated Chaos itself, believing that all four Chaos Gods should be worshipped equally. Defeated and desperate, the majority of the Emperor's traitorous sons fell into the latter category, worshipping Chaos undivided. The Alpha Legion, the Word-Bearers, the Iron Warriors, the Night Lords, and the Sons of Horus, later known as the Black Legion, became the playthings of all four Chaos Gods. Now acting as the pawns to the forces of chaos, these once unified traitor legions splintered. Infighting over the blessings of the Chaos Gods drove the legions into anarchy at the same time that their brethren were hunting them down. Hundreds of Chaos warbands were created out of these traitors that shared beliefs, common goals, or simply had no choice but to fight on their own. Former Legion captains were displeased with the lack of worship to a particular god, while other traitors believed that the Legion was dedicating too much time to a particular chaotic force. Different chaotic mutations began to manifest, and every Chaos Space Marine was now able to act on their own desires, and so independently chase their own chaotic enhancements promised by their different Chaos Gods. Some lucky warbands managed to hold on to their planets or were gifted worlds by their Chaos Gods. Inside these dreadful places, the traitor Marines acted as God Kings to the enslaved population, a perk that was impossible during the Great Crusade. For those traitor legions that did decide to worship one particular god exclusively, the effects of their patron were felt almost immediately, and every one of these traitors changed both mentally and physically as a result of the blessings of their particular Chaos God. Those traitor Marines that allowed themselves to be overcome by rage and bloodlust deep in their two hearts fell to Khorne, the god of war. These Chaos Space Marines are now known as Khorne Berserkers.
Khorne Berserkers are Chaos Space Marines dedicated to glorifying the Chaos God Khorne through brutal melee combat, driven solely by their raging desire to spill blood and take lives. A Berserker's sole purpose in life is to destroy their enemies in the name of the Blood God, and take life in the most brutal and barbaric fashion imaginable. The first coronet berserker among mankind emerged from the gruesome experiments of Angron, the Primarch of the World Eaters Legion. Upon taking control of his Space Marine Legion, the bloody-handed Primarch enacted many changes. Knowing how successful his own cortical implants were at boosting a warrior's prowess in battle, Angron ordered his Apothecarion to insert the same butcher's nail implants within each Astarte of the World Eaters Legion, to enhance aggression and pain tolerance far beyond that which even a gene-engineered flesh of a member of a Space Marine Legion was capable. The nails removed all sense of fear and danger, and then heightened the rush his warriors experienced in combat. The majority of those Astartes implanted with this technology were absorbed back into the 12th Legion's line units, while those deemed perhaps too unstable for such tasks joined a growing number of near-berserker assault units, known as Rampager Squads. And even within these units, those too far gone to be anything but restrained as savages between battles became known as Butchers, a frightening portrayal of what was soon to come for the entirety of the 12th Legion. In the aftermath of the slaughter of the Dropsite Massacre on Isfahan V, an event that the Masters of Bot learned of after the fact, a delegation of senior World Eater apothecaries, aided and advised by peers from the Emperor's Children and Wordbearer's Legion, arrived there unannounced. They quickly assumed command of the induction facilities and instigated a series of revisions to the 12th Legion's recruitment practices. It was long established that the 12th Legion's implantation protocols sat at the extreme end of the spectrum of tolerance, and there have been many calls from Terra and from other legions to rein in these practices. But in the aftermath of the Dropsite Massacre, and with the arrival of the new Overlord Cadre, all restraints were removed. It was said that the raw fuel for the new process had been harvested from the blood-soaked killing fields of the Orgal Depression, ritually gathered by the sons of Lorgar, and alchemaically rendered down by the fell genius of the Emperor's Children. It was to the World Eaters apothecaries that the final duty of implantation would fall. The result was hideous. Using the raw material of the Weiss-dwelling Newman gun cleaners, the apothecaries created a new generation of recruits, where the process of creating a warrior of the Legionis Astarte would ordinarily been painstakingly undertaken over a period of years. This new generation was brought into being in months. The process was shockingly wasteful, and while many aspirants simply perished in the biovats, many more underwent catastrophic biological destabilization, necessitating the purging of the implantation chambers by fire and radiation. Those few who survived fell far short of the transhuman ideal the Emperor had intended for the Legionis Astarte. Even for the World Eaters, these were monsters made flesh, their bodies swollen by forbidden processes, and their brains flooded with burning automatic stimulators that, in conjunction with the so-called butcher's nail implants, standard throughout the Legion, induced a permanent state of hyperaggression. Furthermore, the flash indoctrination protocols to which each aspirant was subjected invested him with the sole memories of 100,000 killings, a flickering montage of other warriors' lives and deaths, cycling through their consciousness in an eternal loop. From the moment each awoke from the gene vats, he believed himself a red-handed champion and a veteran of countless wars. His only desire was to shed blood, his enemies or his own, in the name of his Primarch. This was the birth of the first coronet berserker. When the World Eaters Legion swore itself to the bloody worship of the blood god Khorne, the berserkers were no longer bound to imperial battle doctrines and were given full reign to exercise their bloodthirsty skills. They have since become the ultimate close combat shock troops, entering in the uncontrollable frenzies in the heat of battle. Those Chaos Space Marines who wish to fully dedicate themselves to Khorne usually join the World Eaters to undergo the complex psychosurgery they employ. Once the procedure is complete, they are one with their angry Chaos God, feeling nothing but the desire to kill, maim, and burn. After the World Eaters Legion was sundered at the Battle of Scalathrax, most coronet berserkers formed separate warbands, and many bastardized practices of lobotomization spread to other Chaos Space Marine forces alongside them. Coronet Berserkers are rightfully feared by their allies and their enemies alike, having sworn their souls to the god of war and murder. Berserkers find the need to spill blood for the blood god simply overpowering. Denied the chance to engage in constant slaughter, a berserker will become almost uncontrollably enraged and will turn on any living thing whose life can be extinguished to satisfy his sheer need for carnage. Coronet berserkers will gladly slaughter even their own allies when their blood loss has been stoked by the thrill of battle, or simply because they have run out of enemies. This situation most famously engulfed the mightiest of the Coronet berserkers, Karn the Betrayer, a captain of the World Eater's Traitor Legion. Coronet berserkers' sheer bloodthirstiness has earned them a fearsome reputation, yet their uncontrollable urge to slaughter and kill often leads them being unable to form a cohesive and mutually supportive military unit. This inability, as well as the berserkers' need to kill using primarily melee weapons, often leads them at a disadvantage when facing opponents who are willing to use basic strategies against the berserkers' unreasoning savagery and sheer ferociousness. Berserker warbands show a wide variety in numbers and unit strength, and will essentially lend their aid to whichever side in combat offers them the greatest chance to kill and slaughter in the blood god's name, even if these actions actually aid the Imperium or another of the Chaos Mortal's enemies. Savage fighters that revel in the bloodiest hand-to-hand fighting in the perpetual quest to offer blood and skull to Khorne. Berserkers carry many vicious close combat weapons into battle, many wielding roaring adamantium-bladed chain axes, although the chainsword is ultimately favored. The Chaos Champion that led each Coronet warband can sometimes be seen hefting heavy Baroque weapons aligned with diamond-sharp teeth that can chew through enemy vehicles and get at the crew inside. Ritual knives are worn into battle, the blades of which are only ever used to hack heads from necks. After they have taken the heads of every enemy soldier within arm's reach, the warriors of Khorne will even decapitate their own fallen and offer their skulls to their Chaos God before plunging back into the fray. The stark truth is that the brethren of the Blood God care little how they spill the blood of those around them. As far as the Berserkers are concerned, bare fist or a heavy rock will do if nothing else is available. The Berserkers of Khorne relish their role as the Blood God's sacred destroyers and are fanatical in the extreme. Their delight in pain and death is so strong that they have been known to attack their comrades in blind rage, and if no other opponent is present, even to fall upon their own weapons as sacrifices to Khorne. Even though Coronet Berserkers suffer from their feral bloodlust, they are still Astartes at heart, and most can draw on the experience of millennia of battle and slaughter to remain alive and overwhelm their foes. Berserker tactics are anything but subtle, usually consisting of a massive frontal attack, coupled with flanking maneuvers from the fastest amongst them, with warbands often transported into battle in a rhino, land raider, or assault bike. It is also a common sight to see berserkers make heavy use of drop pod assaults, where their unexpected arrival can spell doom for the unprepared. In battle, berserkers work themselves into hollowed frenzies of insane fury, before charging straight into the heart of their enemy's ranks, where they can quickly bring their melee weapons to bear. The danger of such suicidal attacks is of no consequence to these traitor Space Marines, and they willingly brave all manner of enemy fire and hazards to come to grips with their foes. However, some champions of Khorne are in nominal control of their rage and their warriors, and can easily display a feral cunning that one would never expect from blood-crazed madmen. These stratagems include ambushes where berserkers lie in wait for their opponent and attempt at infiltration before unleashing their blood-crazed fury.
Those Chaos Space Marines willing to sacrifice their own sanity in order to gain an understanding of the warp turned to the Chaos God Tzeentch. The lucky ones became Chaos Sorcerers, but the majority of these traitors were caught in Tzeentch's web of lies and became Rubric Marines.
Rubric Marines, also known by the High Gothic term Rubricae, are the spectral remnants of those Astartes of the Thousand Suns Legion who are now trapped within their suits of ancient power armor as mindless automatons. The tale of how the Rubric Marines came upon their unique fate is a twisted one. It has its beginnings in the time when the Emperor's Primarchs were mysteriously scattered from their incubation upon Terra. The one who would be called Magnus came to rest upon the remote colony world of Prospero. He could hardly have been more fortunate. Magnus was a ruddy-skinned mutant who would have been feared and most probably slaughtered had he arrived at any other world in the Imperium. Instead, he was delivered upon a hidden planet of kindred spirits, because as fortune would have it, a commune of outcast human psychers had settled the planet of Prospero. Magnus quickly reached maturity, having grown into a giant in the psychic, intellectual, and physical sense. He lived in the lone city upon Prospero, which was nestled deep in the planet's ventral mountain range. Magnus too showed great psychic attributes. He did not just channel power from the Immaterium, but instead the Primarch could see into the very realm. Magnus the Red quickly went from adept to absolute master. The Emperor had perceived and recognized his prodigy through the warp, and made haste to find him. It was said that the two knew each other immediately, their minds having long since found each other across the Immaterium. The Emperor immediately granted Magnus command of the 15th Legion of Space Marines, the Thousand Suns. They had been created from his own genetic profile, and thus far had already shown a strong tendency towards psychic mutation. The first thing Magnus did upon taking control over the Thousand Suns was to halt the flesh-cursed mutation that had swept through his ranks. Although finding the knowledge in the warp to achieve this cost Magnus an eye. Next, Magnus led the Thousand Suns to join the Great Crusade, the epic campaign that swept outward from Terra. It was the Emperor's plan to reclaim humanity's lost colonies and to establish a galaxy-wide empire. During the far-sweeping conflict, the Thousand Suns made extensive use of their psychic power. In battle, it was their way to avoid close combat, instead relying upon their sorcerous ways to carry the day. That the Thousand Suns accomplished their triumphs through deception as often as by strength of arms did not initially draw concern. Victory was victory after all. However, the further out the Emperor's new realm expanded, the more tenacious grew the opposition. More and more frequently, the legions of Space Marines would make planetfall and find not colonies of mankind eager to join the fold of the Imperium, but societies of mutants and psychers who violently opposed them. Many of those they encountered were enthralled to demonic forces of the warp. These new foes were granted powers that few could fail to notice were much akin to those widely used by the Thousand Suns and Magnus. Gradually, it emerged that there were some amongst the Imperial Court that were suspicious of the Thousand Suns' methods. Throughout the fleeting Imperium, many called for the purging of the psychic mutations. To solve the growing dilemma, the Emperor himself convened a meeting on the planet of Nicaea to debate. This event would later be known by Imperial scholars as the Council of Nicaea. The Emperor made Magnus to cease the practice of sorcery and the pursuit of knowledge in the related field of arcane arts. It is said that the Cyclopean Primarch's face appeared as stone as he received his father's command. Magnus bowed, pleading that he and his legion would obey. Before the Horus Heresy, Magnus perceived the betrayal of War Master Horus and attempted to warn the Emperor, only to destroy the psychic defenses of Terra and the Webway project. It was said that the Emperor broke contact with Magnus's projected vision with such force that the psychic wards throughout the palace were filled with lightning and shattered. Magnus's warning was delivered but unheeded, and the Emperor directed Limanrus to lead his Space Wolves to capture Magnus upon Prospero. Limanrus and his legion were tricked by Horus into outright attacking the world of Prospero and rampaging through the cities Magnus had created. This became known as the Burning of Prospero. Following the Burning of Prospero, during the opening days of the Horus Heresy, the Thousand Suns settled upon a world prepared for them by their patron chaos god, Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways. Given the potent psychic heritage of the Primarch, it can be no surprise that the Thousand Sons Legion was always prone to mutation. Prior to the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, stringent genetic purity checks and relentless discipline had kept mutation at bay, while the Astartes of the 15th Legion simultaneously developed their potent psychic powers. Having steeped themselves in the raw power of chaos, the Thousand Sons fell prey to the rampant and uncontrolled mutation they called the Flesh Change, to such an extent that the cabal of the Legion's senior librarians, led by the chief librarian, Rubric of Ahriman, determined that something drastic must be done to save the Legion from complete dissolution. With the Legion's Primarch, Magnus the Red, retired to the highest tower of the City of Light on the planet of the Sorcerers, Ahriman and his cabal of like-minded Chaos Sorcerers set about enacting a mighty spell that would purge the Legion of mutation and impurity. Ahriman delved deeper into the pages of the Book of Magnus, a massive tome compiled by Magnus during the Great Crusade that was filled with the forbidden lore and knowledge of the warp from ancient forgotten days. Ahriman believed the Book of Magnus held the key to his Legion's salvation. In the labyrinthian collection of formulas, incantations, and rites, Ahriman devised what he believed would be the beginning of a mighty arcane spell to undo all that had befallen his battle brothers, known as the Rubric of Ahriman. Ahriman and his cabal cast his rubric, and the skies over the planet of sorcerers erupted into an etheric storm of unprecedented proportion. The spell brought was of such unimaginable power that even the demonic horrors fled before the roaring maelstrom. The planet of sorcerers was enveloped in an impenetrable storm of blue and yellow, forks of titanic energies arcing across the planet to strike down each of the Thousand Sons. All but Magnus in his tower and Ahriman's cabal of sorcerers had been scoured by the mighty Rubric. But when the storm receded, Ahriman saw the awful truth of what he had brought. Those that possessed the greatest psychic powers found their abilities augmented, and they arose from the lightning strikes as the most dangerous sorcerers in the galaxy. The majority of the Thousand Sons, however, had a much sinister fate. Instead of purging the flesh of ravaging mutation, each of the Thousand Sons had been transformed. The seals and joints of their power armor had been welded shut, and the body within turned to ashes. What remained was a suit of animated armor, inhabited by a captive specter, devoid of mutation, but of all independent will as well. The newly created Rubric Marines were living suits of ancient power armor, which still moved and functioned and can respond to order just like a sentient man, though they were now little more than automatons. The Thousand Sons sorcerers used these Rubric Marines as bodyguards and enforcers, as well as guardians for the great libraries and vaults of ancient scrolls established on the planet of the sorcerers. The Rubric Marines are quite excellent at the latter role, for they have no spark of curiosity left and are utterly loyal. If promised knowledge and an opportunity to enhance their psychic power, the sorcerers are willing to offer the service of their unliving warriors to others. In battle, the Thousand Sons Chaos Sorcerers enhance their weapons and those of their unliving bodyguards, their bolts blazing with baleful sorceress energies and exploding with sorceress blasts that burn the souls of their targets as much as they do physical damage. The suits of armor that had once been worn by a proud Spacemarine from the Thousand Sons Legion could magically move and function thanks to the Rubric of Ahriman, but the mindless shell needs order to do so. They respond to the mental commands of a sorcerer, obeying him to the letter. Upon completion of their task, the sentience of the Rubric Marines will once again lapse. Without a sorcerer nearby to issue new directions, the Rubric Marines freeze in place, appearing, for all intents, as statues, mere displays of ancient power armor. The Thousand Sons sorcerers have many uses of the Rubric Marines. When they travel from the Eye of Terror in search of arcane knowledge or to acquire slaves to fuel their magical experiments, they take with them the silent, relentless warriors. They make excellent enforcers. In the midst of combat, something of their former selves returns. During such actions, the Rubric Marines are able to move with clarity and purpose for as long as the battle lasts. They are a formidable fighter and can shrug off horrendous wounds. There are countless reports of the Rubric Marines sustaining great rents in their armor, their breastplates blown apart by plasma blasts or run through with a power blade. The arcane powers that surround and animate the armor shell allows them to sustain the damage better than any being made of flesh and blood could ever manage. When the Rubric Marines fire their bolters, they do so with a special shell. Filled with rune-inscribed fury, the shells burn a blue-white contrail of flame, and hit with the ability to blast through power armor and shear their target's very soul. On the battlefield, while the automatons provide a solid bastion of firepower, the sorcerer himself is free to work with the incantations, sending out his own arcane doom bolts. As they are empty vessels, the Rubric Marines make excellent guardians. They will stand on guard for a day, weeks, months, years, or even centuries. Yet should any breach the ward of their sorceress master, they will lurch into action as if mere seconds had passed. The enchantments ensure that their armor never rusts or malfunctions, and that they do not suffer the weakness of flesh, having no need to ever eat or sleep. The Rubric Marines are also impossible to destroy, and only the total destruction of their power armor is enough to release the spirit trapped inside. An audible sigh, a cloud of dust escapes and drifts away into nothingness. How, or even if the Rubric Marines are reinforced, is a secret only the sorcerers of the Thousand Suns and Tzeentch himself know. It has been theorized that the sorcerers can use spells of reincarnation to reinstall those spirits freed by the destruction of their armored forms, rebinding them within a new tomb of power armor. Perhaps Ahriman himself has had his hand in recreating this infamous spell of old, for Ahriman remains the most powerful of the Thousand Sun sorcerers, and has been endlessly active since his banishment. Over the millennia, he has raided more magical knowledge and stolen more arcane scrolls than any other, his guarded hoard nearly as sizable as that of Magnus. However, they are sustained. The Rubric Marines remain relentless enemies of the Imperium, as they have been for nearly 10,000 years. As recent as the 998th year of the 41st millennium, furious battle erupted in the Twilight Realm of the Webway, as the Chaos Space Marines of the Thousand Suns Legion fight their way to within sight of the Black Library. Protected by the indomitable advance of their automaton Rubric Marines, the sorcerers wreak terrible havoc. Their leader, the Master Sorcerer Ahriman, is only stopped when the powerful force of Eldar Harlequins and allies from both Craftworld Ulthwé and Craftworld Lugnarth counterattack. Several major arteries of the Webway are choked with the dead before the warrior psychers of the Thousand Suns are driven from the secret path. The breach is runically sealed, but many neighboring sections of the Webway are lost to chaos forever. It could only be a matter of time before another such attack is launched.
Those fallen brethren that allowed fear of pain and death to lead them down the path of chaos fell victim to Nurgle, the god of decay. These repulsive Chaos Space Marines are known as Plague Marines.
Plague Marines are those Chaos Space Marines who have wholly dedicated their lives and souls to the service of the Chaos god Nurgle. The Plague Marines have dedicated their loathsome existence to spreading corruption and decay across the universe. The plague fleets of Nurgle that periodically spew forth from the Eye of Terror are captained by the Plague Marines, spreading Father Nurgle's warp-spawn pestilence across the star systems of the galaxy, forever spreading the death and decay that are the hallmarks of Nurgle's kingdom. The origins of the Plague Marines can be traced back to the early 31st millennium, during the opening days of the Horus Heresy. Ignatius Grulgor was the commander or captain of the Death Guard Legion's Second Grand Company. During the massacre of the Traitor Legion's Loyalists on Isfahan III that initiated the Heresy, Grulgor was posted on an Imperial frigate, Eisenstein, to kill the Loyalist captain Nathaniel Garro and his 100-strong company of Death Guard Astartes. Grulgor was initially killed in a firefight on the gun decks of the Eisenstein, after a stray bolter pistol shot released the Life Eater virus that had been intended to be used against the Loyalist Astartes of Isstvan III. After the successful escape of the Eisenstein and the following trip through the warp, the body of Grolgor was reanimated by the will of Nurgle as the first of the Plague Marines. After a desperate battle, Grolgor's body was destroyed once the Eisenstein made an emergency transition into real space. His soul banished into the warp. The Plague Lord eventually raised Grolgor as one of his demon princes. In the year 999 of the 41st millennium, Grolgor would return to haunt the Imperium during the Forces of Chaos assault upon Medusa 5. The Plague Marines later appeared en masse at the start of the Horus Heresy. The Death Guard Legion had become becalmed and trapped within the warp, where the Destroyer Plague, later known to the Imperium as Nurgle's Rot, attacked their bodies. For the Death Guard, there was nothing more terrifying than the plague that rendered their legendary resilience meaningless. These were warriors who were immune to disease, contagions, toxins, and pollutions that bedeviled normal men. What the Death Guard endured was unimaginable, yet none suffered more than Mortarion himself. Unable to endure the suffering any longer, the Primarch and his legion offered themselves up to the service of the Lord of Decay in return for their lives. Their bodies became bloated and swollen, with corruption festering within them, but they no longer felt the agony of the warp pox and did not die from the horrific symptoms. When the Death Guard Legion emerged from the warp, they bore little resemblance to the proud Astartes who had entered. Their once gleaming gray armor and the proud heraldry of the once Imperial champion was no more. In their stead was a sickly pale of greenish hue. Each Astarte was now a bloated grotesque covered in pockmarks and boils, scabs and sores. They bore the stink of corruption, as the very air about them was clouded with swarming flies. Even their weapons and war machines had been mutilated and were now powered by the sickly sorcery of chaos, glowing with lamented green energy and oozing gangrenous pus. The Death Guard had become walking pestilence carriers. They had become Plague Marines. Many Plague Marines, particularly those who were originally members of the Death Guard Legion, still prefer to wear the Mark III iron pattern suits of power armor, first used during the Great Crusade. Even though more modern marks of the power armor had become available to them before the Horus Heresy, the Death Guard retained a large stockpile of the heavier Mark III pattern, preferring it both for its durability and the ease with which they could customize it to better handle the rigorous of the often toxic battle zones in which the Legion excelled. The armor of the Plague Marines, regardless of its type, usually suffered from severe corrosion and structural breaches over its millennia of service within a corrupted Astarte. Plague Marine power armor is often further modified with the inclusion of a heretical pattern open vent reactor backpack and blasphemous iconography, as well as swelling or even cracking like a broken eggshell to contain the grotesquely mutated physique of its wearer. The stench alone given off by the Plague Marines is enough to incapacitate many enemy troops. Yet this seemingly neurotic and decaying flesh makes the Plague Marines almost impossible to kill with small arms fire, and they are able to shrug off injury and damage that would destroy even the superhuman physiology of a standard Astarte. When Imperial forces enter combat against these horrific servants of chaos, the mass-concentrated firepower of weapons more commonly employed to deal with armored vehicles is recommended as the key to bringing down these monsters of corruption. A Plague Marine's decaying flesh also attracts maggots and flies. These insects commonly accompany all of the Nurgle's forces, and some of his faithful even cultivate them, considering them sacred animals. It is not uncommon for a Plague Marine to maintain a hive of maggots in his body, which constantly produces a new cloud of large black flies through the structural cracks of his power armor. Plague Marines often make use of Horus Heresy era or more updated versions of standard Imperial ranged weaponry intended for the Adeptus Astarte, including bolters, bolter pistols, plasma pistols, missile launchers, and other standard weapons. These weapons often develop the same signs of corruption and ill repair as the Plague Marine's power armor, and the tortured machine spirits of these weapons make them prone to catastrophic failures that would likely kill even a Space Marine. Yet given the Plague Marine's unhallowed tolerance to injury and pain, these dangers often prove inconsequential for one of Nurgle's chosen. Since the days of the Horus Heresy, many Chaos Space Marines have dedicated themselves to Nurgle, and though few achieve the vaulted ranks of the Death Guard, those who truly wish to join these most futile of followers must first prove their loyalty to the Demon Primarch, Mortarion. Only then will Nurgle bestow upon them the corrupting plague that created the Plague Marines. Outside of the Death Guard, a favored few Chaos Sorcerers of Nurgle know the secrets of the Plague Marines, and Abaddon of the Black Legion has won many of these spellcasters to his cause. In return for loyalty and long service, these so-called Blight Mages will bestow their pestilent gifts in the cause of Chaos Undivided. Plague Marines prefer short-range firefights, where they can see the festering wounds inflicted upon their enemies, while they shrug off the bolts and last blasts directed back at them. Their decaying brains are inured to the agony of their bodily corruption that runs rampant in their diseased carcasses, making them all but immune to the pain or discomfort of battle wounds. When their enemies close within assault range, the Plague Marines make use of their blight grenades and release their toxins that they contain, which proceeds to eat away at armor and fill the air with thick, noxious clouds of blinding spores. The more flamboyant of these blight grenades are made from the severed, decaying heads of their fallen enemies. The plague fleets of Nurgle carry Nurgle's followers to inhabited worlds where the Plague Marines' destructive raids are followed by massive outbreaks of no less destructive contagions. Once these plague ships are abandoned or their crews finally destroyed, their hulks float back into the warp and eventually find their way back to the plague planet, where they may be recrewed for new incursions into the material universe. Plague Marines have an inhuman tolerance for pain, enduring injuries that would cripple even other Space Marines, their nerves dulled by disease or even mostly rotted away, which is the Plague Lord's greatest enhancement of those who embrace him. Plague Marines are normally armed with some manner of bolter with which they unleash a steady rain of firepower, but they may also carry other weapons. They sometimes arm themselves with a close combat power sword that can communicate Nurgle's rot to the victim. The ability to spread Nurgle's rot is a special psychic power granted to a Plague Marine through his connection to the Plague Lord that follows him to summon the horrific plague of Nurgle from the warp and unleash them upon the enemy. Those not tightly armored against biological infestation are instantly affected and quickly killed by the infection. Plague Marines make up the majority of the Death Guard Traitor Legions of Chaos Space Marines, but not all Plague Marines are members of the Death Guard. Any Chaos Space Marine or Renegade Space Marine who dedicated himself to the Plague Lord Nurgle may become a Plague Marine.
Alone amongst the Emperor's traitorous sons, there were those that killed for lust. They murdered their own brother to possess their brother's lands. These were the pawns of Slaanesh, known as Noise Marines. Noise Marines are Chaos Space Marines who are wholly dedicated to the Chaos God Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure. These corrupted Astartes are completely dedicated to pushing their minds and bodies to the absolute limits of sensation. All have spent centuries enraptured in the throes of Slaanesh's service, and their ceaseless devotion has corrupted their bodies until only the most extreme of sensations hold any satisfaction in their pleasure-filled synapses. Now their every thought is bent wholly towards their own self-gratification, and their imaginations insatiably overflow with insane visions of reckless and lonesome indulgence. Along with the fabled transhuman physiology of an Astarte, Noise Marines also possess an extraordinary sense of hearing. This auditory acuteness is a blasphemous mutational gift from Slaanesh himself, extending far beyond that of normal humans, and is sensitive enough to distinguish subtle changes in pitch and tone within even the most cacophonous noises. This foul blessing also warps the way their brains interpret oral stimulation, causing them to undergo feelings of intense euphoria and emotion that increases in proportion to the volume and frequency of the sounds they experience. Noise Marines relish in these sensations above all others, and are entirely obsessed with indulging in their unique abilities, often subjecting themselves to the most overwhelming and chaotic noises imaginable at the slightest provocation. The most beloved way for a Noise Marine to indulge this craving of deafening sound is to immerse himself in the frenzied clamor of battle. There, the harsh cacophony of combat and the shrill screams of the dying are like music to the Noise Marine's callous ears, and his mind quickly fills with powerful emotions of unrivaled intensity that rapidly overpower every other concern. However, the deafening roar of the battlefield is still not enough for most Noise Marines, and he adds to the ear-splitting din with devastating blasts from the sonic arsenals for which they are named. The first creation of the Noise Marines goes back to the days immediately preceding the Horus Heresy. The Noise Marines' name comes from their preference for weapons that use concentrated sound in sonic waves. The Sonic Blaster, and outwardly resembling a bolter, it produced discordant blasts of sound. Also the Blastmaster, a rifle-like weapon that produced different sonic frequencies that overpower senses and can even destroy flesh. And finally the Doom Siren, a loudspeaker surgically melded into the Chaos Space Marine's body that enhanced his own screams into violent torrents of pure sonic force that can knock even the largest enemy off their feet. All of these sonic weapons descended from the musical instruments invented by the famed composer Bek Kinska of Terra, who accompanied the Emperor's Children 28th Expeditionary Fleet as a remembrancer aboard the battle fleet Pride of the Emperor during the Great Crusade. Kinska was a jagged musician, always in search for further sensations to create more exhilarating and all-encompassing music, which made her an easy target for Slaneshi corruption. After Kinska accompanied many of the 28th Expeditionary Remembrancers to the temple dedicated to Slanesh on the Xenos world of Loran, she was touched by the chaos corruption of that foul place, and slowly sought to create the ultimate orchestral piece that she believed would capture the wondrous sounds she had heard within the Lair Temple. Her ultimate masterpiece was a symphony she named the Maraviglia, which she performed to Fulgrim and all the assembled Astartes of the Emperor's Children and their support personnel within the Remembrancer's Lounge, called Le Finis, aboard the Pride of the Emperor. To recreate the sound she had heard, Kinska created new musical instruments whose sonic powers could also be used for destruction when employed by an individual already corrupted by Slanesh. As the Maraviglia began, the cacophony of sound unleashed by these instruments acted as a sorcerous ritual that opened the link between real space and the warp, and allowed the powers of Slanesh to directly touch the audience. During the performance, it was noted that the musical instruments were able to produce effects that were disorienting, stimulating, and downright murderous. Chaos mutations ran rampant through the audience, and the Astartes and humans alike were so overwhelmed by the sensation and uncontrollable emotions that they unleashed in an orgy of both sensual hedonism and the most base form of murder upon one another. Ultimately, the music summoned 5 lesser demons of Slanesh, known as Demonettes from the Warp, who possessed the bodies of Kinska and several of her singers, who joined in the slaughter. During this part of the concert, several Emperor's Children left their seats and took up the instruments to try and keep the chaos music playing, and in the course of their untrained fumbling with the instruments, discovered that they could unleash waves of destructive sonic power filled with the strength of chaos. When the Emperor's Children engaged the Imperial Loyalists during the Dropsite Massacre on Isfahan 5, some Emperor's Children Space Marines took to the field armed with these modified sonic weapons, becoming the first Noise Marines. These corrupted Emperor's Children Astartes soon organized themselves into a unit known as a Cacophony, which was under the command of the Legion's 3rd Captain, Marius Verosian. After the Heresy, the early Noise Marines took their deviant behavior to a new level through their dedication to the patron Chaos God, and over the years of bloody warfare with the Imperium, they have honed their bodies to possess such extreme sensory perception that nothing can stir their emotions other than the din of battle and the screams of the dying. Since the days of the Horus Heresy, the Emperor's Children have splintered, but regardless of the faction, warband, or traitor legion they belong to, Noise Marines wear power armor painted in all manner of striking and bold colors. pinks, blacks, and purples are used predominantly in bizarre patterns all over the armored legs, arms, gauntlets, helmets, and shoulder blades. Their senses are so distorted that only the most extravagant shades and patterns register as pleasing to their mind. Above all else, fear is simply another sensation to these servants of Slaanesh, and they delight in inflicting pain as much as they enjoy experiencing it. Yet despite the novelty and pleasure of death, Noise Marines are in no hurry to partake in it, preferring instead to sample the maraud delights to be found in the service of chaos. They readily accept the many boons of Slaanesh, and eagerly deal with the demon or warlord able to offer them a delicious new access. Many even gaze with undisguised envy upon the seemingly immortal demonic entities who serve Slaanesh, and long to experience the limitless freedom these diabolical beings enjoy, and so pursue the path to demonhood. A Noise Marine indulges in a plethora of uniquely vile experiences and sensations in order to fulfill their unrelenting yearning. Yet for the many temptations that await them within the galaxy, the lust for auditory stimulation is the most enticing of all. Whether achieved through pitched battle or arcane devices, Noise Marines go to any length to attain their desire. There are many forbidden Xeno artifacts and devices in the galaxy, capable of bestowing indescribable sensations on all who dare wield or even look upon them for any length. Noise Marines frequently encounter such items in their travels, and many even develop a taste for these exotic delights and inhuman vibrations. Yet their pleasure often turns to obsession, as these warriors attempt to contrive ever more imaginative and novel ways of incorporating their discoveries into their ceaseless indulgences. These Noise Marines are known as Enochians, and their frantic mania can either be a boon or a bane to those who become entangled in their endless passions of additional relics and alien sensations. Other Noise Marines demand tribute in the form of slaves, which they then incorporate into their own horrific glorification of the Prince of Pleasure. Each captive is fitted with a bizarre array of sonic amplifiers and vox speakers, which cause the recipient great pain and amplify every tortured cry and terrifying gasp to skull-shattering heights. Thus prepared, these pitiful creatures accompany their masters into battle, staggering behind their captors in vast proceedings, bound together with golden chains, each adorned with savage and delicate hooks. They're the many cries of intolerable agony, encouraged with blows from cruelly barbed and toxic lashes, rise together in screeching and discordant adulation for the many pleasures of Slaanesh. Although many of the Chaos Space Marines encountered today can trace their lineage to one of these first founding legions, there are also many traitors that fell to the temptations of the four major Chaos gods after the Horus Heresy. But no matter how they worship chaos, all heretical Astartes are ultimately united by a sheer hunger to prove that their betrayal was justifiable. The truth is that there is no positive ending for those Space Marines that decide to turn to chaos. In the end, their souls will always remain damned. And those were 40 facts on the Chaos Space Marines. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to share it with your friends on Facebook, Reddit, whatever social media you guys use. It really helps out the channel when you do so. And if you guys have any suggestions for any other topics, please comment down below. But with that said, this was Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first, and then